My husband Derek called me suddenly, sounding urgent. He sent a picture that left me stunned. Our family home, the one I grew up in, was being torn apart. My name's Kim, and I live with Derek and his mom Mary. I met Derek at work, but I quit after we got married to focus on homemaking. Turns out, Derek seemed sweet before we tied the knot. But he's really a mama's boy. Living with Mary brought out his true colors. He's always putting her first, even over me, his wife. Mary basically runs our household, making all the decisions about everything from decor to meals. I'm left doing all the chores like her servant. Derek doesn't seem to care how tired or unhappy I am. I'm starting to think I married him just to look after Mary. She's getting more arrogant by the day, never openly mean in front of Derek, but constantly making me feel small when we're alone. I can handle some of her insults and the silent treatment, but it's wearing me down. One day, Mary crossed a line. She called my freshly brewed coffee disgusting and splashed it in my face, almost burning me. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. Tearfully, I told Derek everything when he got home, hoping for support. But he just shrugged it off, saying his mom was just in a bad mood. The next day, Mary was even worse, clearly having heard about our conversation. "How dare you tell my son about our little argument?" she sneered. Then she started attacking my parents, questioning my upbringing. It was too much. I couldn't stand her insults toward my loving parents any longer. I suggested to Derek that we live separately from Mary, but he refused, saying he couldn't disrespect his mom like that. So I made my decision. "Fine, then I'll move out," I said without hesitation. I didn't want to stay in a place ruled by Mary's taste any longer. I quickly filed for divorce and arranged a weekly apartment contract. It took some time to finalize everything, but I knew it was the right decision for my own sanity. The next morning, I left the divorce papers on the table and hurriedly left the house. I really didn't want to go back to my parents' home. I knew Derek might check there first if he came looking for me. I didn't want to cause unnecessary worry or trouble for my parents, so I rushed my move to avoid any further interference from Derek. Afterwards, I arranged a trip for my parents as a gift, using some savings I had from before I got married. My parents were hesitant, but I insisted and sent them on a trip to San Francisco. They deserved some enjoyment, especially since I hadn't been able to properly show my gratitude to them after getting married and always dealing with Mary and Derek. With my parents away, they wouldn't have to deal with Derek causing them any trouble, at least for a while. I was starting to adjust to my new life in the weekly apartment when Derek suddenly called. He had tried several times since I left, but I had ignored all his calls. Reluctantly, I answered the phone, wondering why Derek was calling now. To my surprise, he sounded cheerful, asking how I was. Cautiously, I replied, "What do you want?" He continued unapologetically, saying, "I'm having your family home demolished right now." I fell silent, not understanding what he meant. Demolished? Did you say demolished, like destroying? What on earth are you talking about? "Don't mess with me," I retorted, still not grasping the meaning of his words. He remained nonchalant, saying, "Yeah, I'm selling the land your family home is on to buy my mom a luxurious house." His nonsensical statements left me speechless. With a smug tone, he added, "We're married, so it's shared property, right?" Then he hung up the phone, leaving only the cold electronic disconnected tone. I couldn't believe the ridiculous logic he was using. It sounded like something out of a science fiction movie. I couldn't tell if it was a prank or if he was serious, so all I could do was stare at my silent phone. Then, a notification popped up, a picture from Derek. When I opened it, I saw a house being torn down, its white walls and blue roof just like my family home. I felt the blood drain from my face. Furious, I tried calling him back, but he completely ignored me. Collapsing onto the floor, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. Later, I discovered what had transpired after I left. Derek, as expected, went to my parents' house, only to find out from a neighbor that they were on vacation. The neighbor also mentioned that I hadn't returned home. This news seemed to enrage Derek. He saw it as unfair that my parents were away while I was elsewhere. In a fit of anger, he decided to demolish the house as revenge. Sadly, neither my parents nor I were there to prevent it. Moreover, he hadn't submitted the divorce papers yet, assuming he could do whatever he wanted with my property since we were still legally married. I called my sister, who still lived at the family home, barely able to contain my worry. I couldn't fathom how Derek managed to do it, but if he forcefully demolished the house with her inside, I dreaded to think what could have happened to her. I anxiously waited for my sister to answer. After several rings, she picked up in a relaxed tone, asking what was wrong. Despite my urgency, her attitude remained unchanged, making me feel like I might be overreacting. I hurriedly asked about the house, but my sister's response was unexpected. "Oh, the house. Keith across the street seems to be having some renovation work done or something, but our house is fine." I couldn't believe it, but it had to be the explanation. After a moment of silence, it hit me. The house across the street from ours, where Keith, who had always been kind to us, lived, looked just like ours. Our last names were the same, leading to frequent mix-ups with Christmas cards and visitors. In other words, the house Derek claimed to have demolished was Keith's. I was struck with disbelief. Talking about it gave me a headache. Having our house destroyed would be terrible enough, but accidentally demolishing the neighbor's house was no laughing matter. I quickly explained the situation to my sister and rushed to our family home. Together, we headed to Keith's house. It appeared that Derek and the contractors had already left, leaving the house completely demolished. My sister and I turned pale as a man with an exotic appearance, dragging the suitcase, appeared while letting out a bizarre scream. "My house is gone." It was Keith, who had just returned from an overseas trip. His wide eyes mirrored our shock. Exchanging glances, my sister and I apologized profusely. We explained the situation in detail, but it all sounded like excuses. We couldn't help but feel sorry for involving him in all of this. "We're so sorry that your precious house ended up like this." We continued to apologize. We knew that saying sorry wasn't enough, but it was all we could do for now. Keith seemed shocked by the sudden turn of events. When we apologized, Keith lifted his face and spoke kindly, reassuring us, "It's not your fault. There's someone else who needs to take responsibility." Though his tone was gentle, his eyes held a serious demeanor. He suggested a plan to make things right. A few days later, Derek appeared in front of the demolished house with the contractors. I had called him there, taking a gamble on whether he would come or not. Perhaps he was intimidated by the formal protest, or maybe he just wanted to see my distressed face. Either way, he agreed to come. Accompanied by my sister, Keith, and a lawyer, I went to meet him. Derek seemed surprised to see me with allies, but he quickly put on a brave face. "What do you want now? Nothing can be done about the demolished house. Besides, it's our shared property as a married couple. You have no right to complain." Derek still didn't know the truth. Responding with a hint of pity, I told him, "The house you destroyed wasn't my family home. It was Keith's house." As I introduced Keith, Derek visibly shrank back, intimidated by Keith's anger, which was unusual for the typically gentle man. Derek tried to argue back, saying, "But your maiden name is Jackson, right? I checked properly before demolishing it." Hearing that he had demolished someone else's house, Derek started to panic. I sighed, as if to interrupt him, explaining, "It's not that unusual of a last name. We just happen to live in a similar house and have the same last name. But what are the odds?" Despite being genuinely upset, Derek's response sounded almost like a comedic retort in the midst of the tense situation. My sister chuckled beside me, finding the situation amusing. "This is hilarious," she remarked. Ignoring her, I continued, "Besides, do you even understand what shared property means? My family's land isn't part of our shared property. Maybe you should ask this lawyer here for some advice." At my signal, the lawyer handed Derek a business card. Derek seemed surprised, apparently not realizing he was a lawyer, and stared at the card. My sister leaned in, mockingly addressing Derek, "Don't you know Keith Jackson of our city? he's a famous landowner around here. Indeed, Keith was not just an ordinary man. As my sister later explained, he used to be an executive at the company where Derek worked, the same company where I met him. Sometimes Keith's eyes would lose their warmth, and his expressions carried an aura of influence. It's not my fault. Derek finally seemed to realize the gravity of the situation. His previous boldness was replaced by a panicked demeanor. Unfortunately, the contractors, who should have been his only allies, fled as soon as they heard Keith's story. They were the kind who would demolish a house without proper investigation. Derek must have been caught by a fraudulent contractor. Enough already? Keith, seeming to have run out of patience, yelled at Derek. The air seemed to tremble with the force of his anger. And make your wrongdoing without any excuses, or do you want to involve the police? At these words, Derek became completely subdued. In the end, with a lawyer present, he agreed to our side's demands, and the situation was settled. Derek signed the divorce papers and was forced to write a letter stating that he would pay compensation to both Keith and me. The compensation amount was quite significant due to the demolition of the house, and Derek had already incurred debt for the demolition costs. The unscrupulous contractor had taken the money and disappeared without a trace, leaving Derek with no one to rely on and struggling to repay the debt. The fallout also affected Mary. She had thought she would live with Derek in the luxurious house. But when her son demolished the house of wealthy landowner Keith Jackson, she instantly became a target of ridicule. Naturally, she could not accept such a situation, and soon she found it difficult to leave her house. As for Keith, although his house was demolished, he hadn't suffered too much damage. The reason he had gone on an overseas trip was his daughter who lived abroad. He had received an international call from his son-in-law, saying that his daughter was about to give birth. Having lost his wife 20 years ago, Keith doted on his grandchild and decided to live abroad with his daughter, as she had previously consulted with him. So he intended to demolish the house and sell the land after selling his business. Of course, he was shocked because the house had disappeared sooner than expected, but he laughed, saying that the result was the same. I didn't inform my parents of anything until they returned from their San Francisco trip, because I didn't want to ruin their vacation. When they returned home and heard the whole story, they turned pale and were speechless. But they were relieved that nothing had happened to me. At my parents' suggestion, Keith stayed at our house until his business was settled. I also moved back to my parents' house from the weekly apartment, and we spent our time reminiscing about our memories with them, who would soon be unable to return to the U.S. for a while. About a month later, the day of Keith's departure finally arrived, and our family went to the airport to see him off. He was carrying a bunch of toys, and he seemed so excited to see his grandchild that he looked like he might start dancing. Although it was a time for goodbyes, his happiness was so infectious that we couldn't help but smile. We waved our hands as we watched him head towards the boarding gate. A few months later, we received several airmail letters from Keith, each containing photos. In every photo, he was holding his granddaughter, looking incredibly happy. My sister said, "They've been nagging us. They want to see their grandchild's face. It's definitely Keith's influence." I agreed. My sister and I had begun to hear our parents expressing their desire for a grandchild as well. Seeing Keith's happy face and the adorable photos of his granddaughter made me want to have a family of my own. But next time I get married, I vow to choose someone who isn't a mama's boy and who will genuinely cherish my family.